Welcome to the Sonic Days podcast, home of all things audio. This season was recorded live at Sonic Days 2024. Wireless dropouts and interference. Two things every sound professional dreads. But what if most of those issues could be solved with one key principle? In this episode, Jonas Næsby from Sennheiser breaks down how proper separation of antennas and equipment can eliminate the majority of wireless audio problems, whether you're working on stage, in broadcast, or live production.
See if this works. Cut, yeah. We have to get started at some point. Thank you so much for coming. So Lars from Sonic College called me up a month ago or so and said, can you do something about just like what's the most common things that go wrong? Fix the whole damn thing, basically. So we came up with that, we can maybe do 90%. And then we left about, well, maybe the last 10% is out of reach, and that's why it doesn't work. That was a very bad joke, very early in the morning. Tomorrow. No, maybe they're just outside of reach of where the coverage is, so I don't know. So that's basically it. My name is Jonas Næsby. I work for Sennheiser. Then I have my own small company as well, where I do frequency coordination. I've basically been working with wireless microphones my entire life. I had an after-school job in an MI store, and someone came in from a supplier at some point when I was 16 years old and showed us a wireless microphone, and that kind of triggered something in me, and that is now 30 years ago. So I've been working for Sennheiser for the past almost 19 years now, doing all sorts of different things. Started in service, and now I work in what we call technical application engineering, which is a role that sits somewhere in between sales, development, and product management, basically being the link between all our internals and you as the customer, basically. So we do lots of tests on new prototype systems. We give lots of input for next generation systems or next generation firmware, because a lot of stuff can't be updated these days. Then I said I have that small company on the side where I do frequency coordination for various different things. Next year I have 2 different World Cups in sports. I have some of the biggest festivals in Europe and lots of other things on top of that. Then I've been fortunate enough to be head of RF for some of the biggest shows in the world. I've done 7 Eurovisions, I believe, and lots of other stuff, Carnival in Rio and such things. And then I do system designs for large-scale touring as well. So some of the biggest world tours, we've helped them with system designs, what will work on a stage and how do we get them around the world when they start touring. So done quite a few different things. Think I've seen most of the issues that happen, and it's very often the same things that comes up again and again that triggers why wireless microphones kind of perform badly. Personally, I think that's what's super interesting about wireless microphones, because it's not, does this work or does it not work? It's all a matter of how well does it work. And then we can tweak all the parameters, we can do various different things to help improve range, because that's what it's all about, basically. So if you look at where it came from in the history of Sennheiser, this is Professor Fritz Sennheiser, who founded the company right after the war. And then in the 50s, he got approached by some of the German broadcasters and said, we would really like a microphone without a wire. That's the device he came up with. That is called MicroPort. For those at least from Denmark, you will know that is basically what everyone says about a device in this kind of form factor with a microphone attached to it, no matter the brand, no matter the model, no matter whatever, but that's the product. That is the MicroPort. It was super easy back then because we could do 1 channel simultaneously. So you could buy that, you could call us up, you could order a MicroPort, and then you got that device. There was no different models, there was no menu layers of tuning and setting and doing things, but you were kind of limited to that 1 channel. In 1960, I believe, we were up to 3 simultaneous channels, and that was big stuff. But I guess we all can agree that times are changing, productions are growing, it's getting bigger and bigger. A few more pictures of how it evolved over the years. That's one of the first receivers we had. That's a later generation MicroPort transmitter, which now got us slightly bit smaller, now being solid state based instead of tube based. But the long-term evolution of what has happened to wireless is absolutely stunning, and just what's happened over the last 10 years is staggering, basically. It's speeding up like never before. That's back from some of the first multi-channel systems that came out in the 80s, where the musicals started growing in channel count, where they did Cats and all of that stuff. Then we added companders to get better signal-to-noise ratio. We could suddenly group two receivers to do diversity, to get more stable reception, and lots of things that has happened over the years up until system sizes that are just unbelievable now. I mean, I think we're running a musical in Holland now, which is 160 channels or something like that. So the days of a 32-channel system being big is long gone. That's like the amateur theater community thing for the kids kind of setup these days. So if we look at what goes wrong, basically, because we get calls sometimes saying, oh, I just bought this new microphone and it's absolutely shit. I don't get more than 10 meters of range out of it. And I usually are bold enough to say, well, maybe it's not the product. Maybe there's something we can do to help get you a better performance out of this one. So anyone care to suggest or guess what's the main problems for wireless microphones?
It can be channels squeezing too close to each other, and that's one thing. And maybe there's your frequencies lying in banded area where there's a TV channel or something like that.
Absolutely. First one, I will translate into it's other systems being the problem. It's the system itself where some channels cause issues for other channels. Yes, there can be external interference from a TV tower or something. But other than that, most of the interference we experience is stuff we do to ourselves, either by bad handling or bad setup of our actual wireless devices, or from other technical devices that is being brought into the production. External interference, someone doing something outside, very, very seldom that that's the case. Someone on the production is usually to blame, whether that's video or lighting or something else. We just had a funny thing that the Martin Audio Moving Head something, their latest firmware update states less interference for IM systems. But that's good. That means that they are now taking it serious, that they are now starting to understand how we are actually causing problems for others. And then they start to help with it. That was not the case in the early days of, say, LED screens that was putting out lots and lots of RF, affecting performance of wireless microphones. But as no one could see that it was the screen doing it, the wireless microphones were to blame. So that's kind of it. So in my opinion, it's usually due to different equipment profiles. Different systems perform differently, so you need to know how to handle them, how to select frequencies for them. And then there's the handling, how do you physically space them, basically. So most systems on the market create something called intermodulation. That is additional frequencies being generated when you power up more than one device of wireless microphones. If you then put them in close proximity, in this case it's a scan, we have 4 systems on air. These are our actual transmitters, and if you put those transmitters in close proximity, they will generate additional byproducts in between. If you then tune, in this case, a 5th device to this one, well, that spike sitting here below it will affect the performance of that you tuned on top. So you would need some kind of offset. That's what we have fantastic different software packages to calculate. That's why there's equipment profiles where you can select different things, and then we can work around this. But it's wireless microphones occupying spectrum that they are not using. So we are wasting spectrum, which is not a good thing to do when we have to, say, put 100 channels on air. And this is an exponential curve. With 4 channels, we can kind of see the count here. It's not much. With 32 channels, there's 17,000 additional byproducts, worst case, on air that you need to have in your calculation. And then we can't remember the math anyway. So it reduces the potential channel count drastically. We've been working extensively over the past close to 15 years now on eliminating intermodulation from all our systems. So I can proudly say all our digital systems don't generate any intermods anymore. So we can now do just equidistant spacing, and then there is no byproducts, no matter how you handle them, basically. So this significantly increases the channel count. It significantly increases the predictability of the system. We very often hear, I had a dropout at this point, or I heard some noise at this point, and these 3 actors were close together, and someone was over there, and some voodoo happening, or ghosts in the system tonight. No, it's this. And because this is not a constant, but this is a byproduct of physical handling, it's very, very difficult to predict, and it's very, very difficult to reproduce what went wrong on that certain night. So getting rid of this significantly simplifies how you set up and use wireless microphones in the most stable way. It also means we can increase the channel count dramatically, that we don't have to calculate with all these byproducts, that we just can set a channel-to-channel spacing and not having to think about anything else. So that's a major step forward, and it's fantastic that we now have it also in the middle range series, that you don't have to think about that, because it really simplifies it when you are setting up bigger systems. But still, we get the call, oh, I get a short range out of this one. And coming back to, I promised last I would fix 90% of your issues. So let's see what we can do. A lot of people go to the internet. There's lots of different internet forums with lots of brilliant sound engineers or brilliant RF engineers, or how should I put this? These well-meaning people who wants to help you the best way possible. It's just very often that's not what we see. We see a lot of people replying to threads online on Facebook or whatever, Reddit, all these different forums, but sometimes it's just completely irrelevant and misinformation and not helping the guy in trouble. Common questions: have you scanned? And a lot of people say, well, just traveling with one channel. It's like, have you scanned? You don't need to scan a single channel, in my opinion. If you switch off your transmitter, look at the RF meter. If it's clean, that's you already scanned that channel. So you don't need to sweep the whole spectrum. Next one, have you tried a different squelch setting? Is a very common reply. No matter if it's an analog or a digital system or whatever the issue is. Digital have no squelch setting. That's an all analog thing, which is a simple gate that switches off the XLR connector if RF drops below a certain level. But very often we see, have you tried a different squelch setting? Not a higher or a lower, just a different one. That bit different might be better. Without knowing why you would change it. Just try 5 instead of 3. That helped me. So they reply in the best meaning possible, but doesn't really give any valuable feedback in that case. Did you do a firmware update? We've done lots of firmware updates in our time. In all the analog systems, it's mainly about hardware revisions or adding a frequency range in a different country. Does nothing for the performance. In digital, that is slightly different, so that could actually fix certain issues. We had a firmware where diversity didn't work. Very good idea not to use that one. Not proud of that bug, but it was there. Try active antennas. That's a very common one as well. And I will show you why that's not always a good advice. If you put it up louder, it must be better. Just like we all know, if you have a powered loudspeaker like this one, putting a power amplifier in front of that instead of feeding it with a line signal makes it play louder. Doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Oh, or just change that brand is shit. Just try another one. It's like... So internet is fantastic. There's lots of good advice there, but there's also a lot of bad advice that sends people in wrong directions, and we see that over and over again. And sometimes I go into some of these discussions, and sometimes I just, oh, why do I even bother? Because it always takes a detour that you didn't predict. So we're here to fix 90% of your issues, and I came up with the idea that we need to manage separation anxiety, because everything that causes issue is basically due to something being too close to each other. So we will end up with a separation master list. So we need to practice the art of detachment. That's what makes your wireless systems work the best way possible. So let's start with this. What's the operating range of a wireless microphone? Best answer in the world, Eddie.
Also knows how to hold the microphone.
That's a very good thing as well. She's doing well. I usually ask, what's the length of an elastic rubber band? Because it depends on how much energy I put into it. So I can design a wireless system to have the range you want. I've done 1 kilometer on 30 milliwatts. It's possible, but it means I have to do certain things to get there. I can definitely not put anything in between or attach a body pack to a human body, but it's doable. The power of that is actually capable of reaching that distance. Would I use that for a big production? Most likely not. It depends on what it is, at least. So we need to do various different things, basically to stretch the elastic rubber band to build the range we want to have. And range on a wireless microphone is dictated by something called carrier to noise. So we have a transmitter in this case. I hope you can all see it. But this is a small little snippet of a spectrum scan in the TV band where we mostly operate. So the first block we see here, that is actually an active TV channel. So the person setting up the system did good. They didn't put it on top of TV, which in Denmark would actually be illegal also. So they actually tuned into this range beside of it where it's allowed to be. We powered up a wireless microphone. This is this narrow spike we see here. So this is our carrier, this is our wanted signal, and this is our noise floor. And the distance between these two is actually your range. Depending on what kind of system you have, this needs to be a certain level above noise for the system to work. That's how it is. So if, let's say this doesn't give you the range you want, we start walk testing our system, and this doesn't give us the performance we want. At some point, this wanted signal drops into the noise, and we get a dropout. The internet just told us, add an active antenna. So we now put an active antenna on. That's an antenna with an amplifier. Amplifiers are, by nature, stupid devices. They take what comes in and makes it louder. So they take in TV, they take in noise, and they take our wanted signal and amplifies the whole thing. Our carrier to noise is unaffected, that's the same, so our range is most likely similar, if not possibly worse, because we elevated the entire noise floor that the receiver now have to cope with. In this case, it's a pair of stick antennas on the backside of a receiver sitting inside of a rack. So instead of putting an active antenna or a booster on that pair of antennas in the rack, taking an actual pair of antennas, removing them from the rack, getting them away from this noise source, so we see the noise drops a bit, because all the different devices we put into our racks, they radiate a tiny bit of noise. And then getting the antennas out into the open, where they can actually see the performance area, we capture more of the signal we want. So we significantly improved our carrier to noise ratio. That's how we build range. If noise goes up by 10 dB, for instance, we would need a 10 times more powerful transmitter to overcome that. But this is almost free of charge by just taking the antennas out of the rack where they can see the performance area and where they are away from the noise source. So this is carrier to noise. This is something we're not really good at specifying it from the different manufacturers. Actual power of this is set by law, that's the transmitting power. But it's one of those things that's important for you to understand, because that's understanding this phenomenon is what safeguards your performance. I mean, if we took those antennas and moved them out and you put a 100-meter thin coax cable on it, that has losses, and then we would get less of this. So it's a matter of tweaking these different things. So it's basically a measure of the distance between your wanted signal and the unwanted signal, or your microphone signal-to-noise ratio, or comparable to audio signal-to-noise ratio, but just in the RF domain. So we cannot see it, but we have those nice small meters on the receivers or remote control software where we can read out this thing. So that's actually the dictate of range. And if we can get more of the signal we want and less of the signal we don't want, then we are winning. Someone has said, does scanning help? It can help, absolutely. Scanning is not a bad thing. There's a reason we build it into all the devices. We can buy all sorts of fancy devices that can do scans. This is a scan from the Danish event called Folkemødet. There's quite a lot of activity going on. We have 800 microphones on air for this event. So yes, it can be done. And here we can, of course, figure out, okay, where do we want to put additional microphones, and you want to scan with that. So yes, spectrum scanning is even built into most of the receivers now. If you are in, I don't know, 500 euro plus price tag it for a single receiver, you can connect a computer, you can do something similar to this, and from that you can select the best possible frequencies. You can also just look at your actual receiver rack. In this case, it's just a number of receivers being connected to a computer, and we can then see the RF meters basically of all the receivers. If you're touring with this rack and you rolled into a new venue and you power up your rack and it looks like this, Well, this is now a real-time scan on all those frequencies you are tuned to. And if they are completely clean as here, well, that's a real-time scan on the frequencies you intend to use. You actually don't care about all the others then. You could do the same with your IEMs. If you come in, set up your IEM, switch on all your packs first. Look at the meters. Are they clean? Well, then power up your rack. You're good to go. There is no point of starting over. I hear a lot of touring actuators like, oh, you always need to scan when you come to a new place. Kind of true, but that is a scan in my opinion as well. If it's just a single device, just look at the meters. Power off the transmitter here, and if that meter is completely clean, then that channel is clean. It's also a top trick to do before you send your headliner on stage, because no fancy measurement device can measure if something sits below your own transmitter. So the best thing you can do before sending the main act on stage, power off that transmitter, check if the channel is still clean, and then power it on and send them out on stage. Because you don't know if someone walked in. Quality meters on some of the digital systems can kind of give you an indication, but the interference needs to be really, really close for that to come into effect. The error correction and concealment is extremely powerful on the modern digital systems. So carrier to noise. Well, the noise can change. There is interference. There's plenty of interference sources in this world. Best way to monitor it is, as I said, turn off devices. So if you switch off all your wireless transmitters as before, and you still see noise on some of them, and it wasn't there before, lighting powered up or something like that, well, then you can start running around switching off various different devices. You can also take your antenna out of the rack and start pointing it at different things. If I point an antenna or put a receiver right here next to the HDMI cable, that's going to radiate noise right into my receiver. But luckily, RF works with the inverse square law. So every time we double distance, we cut that noise in half. A few years ago, I did a theater install in Copenhagen. They bought a brand new system. It was all good. They reused almost the old antenna system. They just moved them a few meters from where they were because that fitted better with the stage props. And they called me up and said, doesn't work at all. The new system is absolutely shit. Went there and they had moved the antenna so it sat half a meter away from an SDI patch point on the wall in an unshielded wall box. SDI is RF-wise wideband noise. If you want to jam an event, don't do it. Just put an antenna on an unused SDI output and you're killing everything. It's an absolute crazy noise source. So I walked in there, moved one antenna half a meter, and the system was absolutely perfect. So separation again. So that's kind of how it all goes. Do we need a spectrum analyzer? Spectrum analyzers are fantastic. I own several ones, but they are also quite complex measurement devices that's so easy to set wrong. So they either overload or that they don't really show you the actual noise flow. So receivers with scanning functionality is much better because that's the device we intend to use for reception anyway. So they are looking at it with the correct set of eyes, you could say. But unfortunately, yes, we see interference from all sorts of different things. AV installations, control systems, video devices, video cables, if they are poorly shielded. What else do we have here? Some of the lights are doing weird stuff. Basically, just consider every other electronics a potential interference source and don't group your antennas close to other electronics. Get them out in free space. That's the best advice, basically. Separate them from whatever potentially causes issues. Just an example, this is again a spectrum scan done with a simple receiver. In this case, we see some active TV, and then we see all of these noise spikes coming from some weird thing. This was again a pair of antennas sitting inside a rack. There's a network port on all the receivers, so we might even generate a little bit of noise in the rack ourselves. This is again just moving the antennas away from the rack, lowering that completely noise flow, getting away from this rubbish basically that would potentially affect the range of your wireless microphones. So external antennas are becoming more and more important for everything. Then we have a phenomenon called blocking that very often causes issues for wireless microphones. This is basically when a transmitter or a transmitting device on a different frequency than we are using are in so close proximity to our receiving antennas that it's basically blinding it. Similar to saying, I have a camera, I want to take a picture in the dusk, and someone points a flashlight right in front of it. That camera sensor cannot really figure out to take that picture in the dusk, Or you put a microphone in front of a Marshall stack and expect it to pick up someone whispering in the corner at the same time. Doesn't work that way. So this is what would happen if, say, one device is tuned 1 megahertz away from one we are using, and we are trying to send them 50 meters away, and then we put that one device right on top of our receive rack with a pair of stick antennas. Would simply be overloading and blinding the front end of the receiver. So our rule of thumb is to always separate a transmitting device from a receiving device by minimum 4 meters. Some of the other manufacturers say 6 meters, but 3 to 6-ish meters is where we definitely want to be in bigger multi-channel systems. If any of you are working in film or TV or back use, we know that's not always possible. So we have a transmitting device in the back and we have all the receiving devices in the back. And it's really difficult to get 4 meter distance. But it's a good idea to take that transmitting device and at least try to get it as far away from the receiving antennas in the back to get best range out of that. If you cannot get physical spacing, then we can do frequency spacing instead. So we put that in the complete other end of the spectrum, and then it doesn't affect as much. But this is really something to think about. And if we move into a venue, this could be a concert. This is a very common scenario. We move in a monitor console on the side of stage. We are all kind of lazy by nature. So we put up 2 antennas on the doghouse of the console for reception, and we put up a transmitting antenna for our IEM. All summer, I would say, most of the issues I fixed on festivals this summer was walking up on stage and moving the IEM antenna 2 meters away from the receive antennas. Because you gave me frequencies that doesn't work. I even saw a transmitting antenna on the same boom, stereo boom, as the receiving antennas, completely overloading that front end, even though they were carrying a fantastic, most expensive system in the world. So moving that antenna away fixes a lot of problems, basically. But I understand we want to go down to the next show. So if you just do that and roll out, it's absolutely fine. And it works a lot of times. Sometimes it's fine. And maybe you just need that 10 meter coverage on a stage, and then it's absolutely spot on, even though it elevates the noise floor a bit. But remember, the day it doesn't work, do this trick. Switch off your microphones, look at the RF meters, see if it changes when you take your IEM antenna away. Next thing is, let's say we have a band of some kind here. We have a horn section. They all wear a transmitting device as well, but they are not part of this song. So they go and stand somewhere. They stand right in front of our receiving antennas on the side of the stage, blocking signal from our main performer we want to pick up, at the same time having all their transmitters right in front of these receive antennas. Also a common scenario. So if we do have the time and the possibility, at least try to elevate them, get them out of the way, because then you don't have that problem. Same goes for a theater install. Don't put your receiving antennas right at the stage entrance where the entire cast might be standing right in front of them. Even better, move one antenna to the other side of the stage so no stage props can be in between. So, if we come back to basically trying to fix all these issues, I came up with an idea of a separation master list because we were here to practice the art of separation. So one thing we want to do, we want to separate the antenna of a body pack from the human body. We are saltwater tanks. We affect the performance of antennas. We actually change the resonant frequency of antennas when we get this little wire against our skin. We actually might, from mounting a body pack under a costume with the antenna against the skin and the actor starts sweating, that might lose 90% of your radiated energy. Just having 5 millimeters or 1 centimeters of distance and some isolation in between gives you insanely wider coverage. So that's the best trick. That's the most important separation, basically. Then we want to separate our receiving antennas from metal structures. We saw the half-wave dipoles. You don't want to tape that onto a metal pole like this one, because that affects the performance of that antenna. They need to be in open space. We want to separate our transmission path from obstacles. If we can get line of sight from our antennas to the performers, then we get the best energy transfer. It's also why antennas on opposite sides of stages are a fantastic thing. For fixed installs, absolutely always. For temporary stage installs, I understand if you don't want to run the hassle of having a cable under the stage. Separate antennas from noise sources. We saw that in the scans from before. Separate antennas. And this is when it comes to diversity. All our receivers basically have 2 antennas. Separate those 2 antennas by minimum quarter of a wavelength. Otherwise, diversity doesn't work correctly. So that's 10 to 15 centimeters in the frequency ranges we typically work. That's also why diversity on IM packs is not ideal, because the antennas are too close. It works, but it doesn't give you the full performance of what it could do. Separate transmit and receive antennas by minimum 4 meters. Kind of difficult as well if you put an IM pack and a microphone transmitter onto the same talent. So here we want to space them physically as much as possible, and then we want to separate them minimum 8 megahertz in frequency spacing. Otherwise, we experience that blocking phenomenon of before. Wider separation is definitely more wanted, but 8 megahertz is the absolute minimum of frequency spacing between a transmitting and receiving device fitted to the same person. Separate your signal from the noise. That's basically the carrier to noise we talked about. I sent this out to a number of colleagues to ask for more, and one of them came up with, funny enough, the UK guys that separate the RF engineer from the bar. That's the most important one. The Americans said separate church from state, but that's a complete different story. But I think actually this list will get you close to those 90% we are talking about in terms of fixing most issues. This is basically where it all comes from. Then, of course, you need to separate your hand from the handheld antenna. Eddie, you said that, holding the microphone correctly. There's 2 ends of a handheld microphone where you don't hold it. One is the capsule element, and the other is the antenna element. The last one is separate your transmitter to transmitter frequencies according to the device you're using. Wireless systems are not born equal. Certain devices need 1 megahertz of physical or frequency spacing. Others can go down to 200 or 300 kilohertz. So knowing the device and how they perform, and then also separate your transmitter frequency to the intermodulation product if it's an intermodulation generating system. And most of them are, both analog and digital systems out there, but parameters differ. Sticking to that list should basically get you there. Thank you so much for coming. Hope you can take something home from this, and this will make more systems work more reliable.